You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I don't talk in real life about having hoarding disorder, so I talk about it on this podcast instead. And because I'm anonymous, I can talk really, really honestly. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I am well.
Let's start with some housekeeping.
So, 3 things to talk about in housekeeping today. The first is a really cool, fun thing I've been working on, and that is I have made a 2025 decluttering inspiration calendar that you can buy. So it is every month. It's really pretty, first of all, very colourful and rainbowy and lovely. And what I've done is I've made every month with a quote for some inspiration. And the thing with having an inspirational quote on the wall for a month, importantly, I find that my relationship with that quote changes through the course of the month. It might mean one thing to me at the start of the month and an entirely different thing to me by the end of the month as I kind of contemplate it over time. But also because there's a new one every month, you don't tune it out so much because there's that element of novelty on the first of every month. One of the reasons I decided a calendar would be a good thing to make for you was that they go on the wall. They don't go on a pile in the floor. They go on the wall. They don't take up space. And they are there just kind of overlooking us as we try and focus on what we want to do through the month. Because I know far too well how hard dehoarding a home is. And I know that staying on track and staying motivated and staying proactive is tough, and we need all the help we can get. So the aim really is to have something on the wall that is encouraging and inspiring, but not like ridiculously pushy. And so I chose the quotes quite carefully. They are very pretty, and I think you'll like it. If you want to get your very own 2025 decluttering calendar, you can do so. You can find them at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/2025. So that's just the numbers. So overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/2025. And the place that is selling them for me prints them on demand, so there's no waste, there's no additional ones printed that might not sell. If you order one, it's printed specifically for you. So I think reducing waste in that kind of way feels great. It would be lovely if you wanted to get a copy. I've also put a blog post up on the website at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk where you can see like example pages and that kind of thing. But I hope you love this idea. I love this idea. I've ordered one myself, and hopefully it will help us all next year. Second bit of housekeeping is the accountability Zoom sessions, which are going beautifully. As this episode comes out, there is one in a week's time, but you can see all the dates of all the future ones at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket, where you can see the dates of future sessions and book yours. If you want to know a bit about how they work, there's no pressure to have your camera on. Most people don't have the camera on. We pick something that we each want to focus on in terms of dehoarding that day, and we introduce ourselves, and then we start getting on with our dehoarding. And there's always just really nice chats as we do that are really supportive and encouraging of each other. It's a lovely vibe, and I appreciate everybody who has attended for that. So if you would like to come to a future one, overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. And the third and final bit of housekeeping is that this month's Hoarding Darlings monthly update has gone live for November. So if you are a Hoarding Darling member, read that. If you would like to become a Hoarding Darling member to get that extra little update from me every month, you can do that at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. Goodness me, let's get on to the meat of this episode. So I have a problem that I've been trying to solve for probably years. I find lists very useful. I find it gets stuff out of my brain and onto paper so I can stop worrying about forgetting things. And I find that having it down somewhere helps me to then organise what I'm going to do next, what order things might be useful to do in, what I need to prioritise, that kind of thing. My problem, though, has always been when I think of something that should probably go on my list, how do I capture that idea without getting distracted? For a long time, I used a website called Toodle-Do, which for me was perfect for a number of years. I've moved away from that now for a number of reasons, but one is that whenever I needed to add something to Toodle-Do, I needed to either open the app or open the website, and I would invariably get distracted. As soon as I open my phone, even if I'm going just focus, just open the Toodle-Do app, then I see there's a notification, I see there's something, and before I know it, I've been on Instagram for 20 minutes and I've no idea what I turned my phone on for. Same with the website. And I do sometimes do handwritten to-do lists as well. But I find those difficult for bigger picture things or longer term things, i.e. longer than a single afternoon, because I know I'll lose the paper or the notebook. I know I will before I finish doing the tasks. So I've been trying to master for probably years how to capture ideas to my to-do list in a way that doesn't distract me, and how to turn a to-do list into actionable items, actionable steps, things I might actually do. So what is idea capture, first of all? It's simply you have an idea and you need to capture it. You need to make a note of it, whether that is on paper, on an app, in your notes app on your phone, in a voice note, any of those things. It's a way of getting an idea out of your head and onto paper. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you sit down and say, what are all those things I needed to remember? And you get them down, and there you have captured your ideas. But there are other times when you are in the middle of doing something and you suddenly remember, oh, I mustn't forget to do that. But you're in the middle of something. That, for me, was always where I struggled with idea capture. But there are real benefits to being able to capture our ideas when we're trying to dehoard our homes. Getting something onto a list, kind of like outsourcing your brain, it declutters your brain. It helps us to then create a better plan for dehoarding and sorting out our homes. So I read an article on a website called Thinker's Notebook called The 5 Elements of an Idea Capture System That Works. So Thinker's Notebooks say that an idea capture system has to have these 5 factors. One is omnipresence. It should be readily accessible at all times. So no matter where you are, no matter what day it is, you've got access to your idea capture system. The second one is efficiency. It's got to be quick and easy to use. If you have to jump through multiple loops to use it, that doesn't really work. The third element, they say, for a good idea capture system is organisation. It should make it easy to organise and retrieve your ideas. The fourth element is security. Should protect sensitive information. And the fifth element is respect for offline thinking. It should accommodate the fact that many people do their best thinking away from technology. And so there are different ways to capture your ideas. I'm going to be honest now, not all of them cover all 5 of those, but it seems like a good framework to assess different idea capture systems. And we can aim for most of them. You might want to go for all of them, in which case, good luck to you. Let me know the one you find. But we're not being perfectionists here. If we get an idea capture system that works for us, then even if it doesn't cover those 5 elements, it works for us. But it's just a good framework to think in terms of when you're thinking about capturing ideas. I don't know if you can hear background noise, but it is, as I am recording, it is bonfire night here in the UK, also known as Guy Fawkes Night, where the country sets off fireworks and lights bonfires. So there's lots of fireworks going on in the background, but it was unavoidable timing, unfortunately. So let's talk about different ways of creating to-do lists, different ways of outsourcing our brain. Very popular these days is digital to-do list type apps. There are apps like Evernote where you can take notes and manage your tasks, and OneNote for organising your notes and sharing them. There are task management apps that incorporate to-do list type structures. I mentioned one, Toodle-Do, that I used for a long time. There's also Todoist. If you are a more visual person, you might want to look at something like Trello, or for Kanban tools where you can like map out what needs to be done and when and how much you've done of that. There are things like Taiga, Taiga.io. And then there are apps that we might already use every day, like Google Calendar or Outlook Calendar. There are apps like Google Tasks, which is the one I have moved towards. But it doesn't have to be digital. Any old scrap of paper can be a place to capture a to-do list. If you lose notebooks all the time, scraps of paper can be surprisingly effective. But then there's also notebooks. You can have lists in a generic notebook. You can use planners, like pre-printed planners. There's also bullet journals for people who like that visual, very pretty way to customize your own planner and track your tasks and your habits even. And then there's also things like getting a big piece of paper and drawing a mind map. Arrows, which can show, I've got to do this before I can do that. You can just put the word kitchen in the middle and scribble all around it all the different things you've got to do. There's all kinds of ways of capturing ideas in a way that makes sense to you. And the way that makes sense to you will depend on a whole number of things, like your personal preferences, your learning style even. Are you a visual learner? Do you prefer auditory? Do you like lists? Are you someone who can write tasks in a notebook without losing it? Amazing. Are you very tech savvy, in which case you might be very comfortable with the technological tools? Are you a bit tech nervy and you don't really want to trust the contents of your brain to an app? All of these are things to think about when trying to work out the best kind of idea capture approaches for you. And you might start thinking one way works for you and then realize a different way would be better. That's okay. We're all learning and growing and developing all the time. You might start with one approach and expand it. You might start with one approach and change it altogether. That's all fine. You can just test something out to see if it works for you. You're not committing to an approach for the rest of your life by giving it a try. So when you think about things like notebooks or apps or mind maps, think first of all, are any of those things you already know work for you? In which case that's a tick in that box. Are they things that you feel intrigued by, or are they things that you feel put off by? Think about which would be useful to you consistently. Like, you might like the idea of a big piece of paper and a mind map, but can you carry that around with you if you have a sudden revelation in the supermarket? What's flexible enough to fit in with your life? What works efficiently? If something's going to involve a lot of work just to get it out and get it set up, that's not efficient, and there are too many points at which you could be diverted, basically. What's accessible to you? If you don't have a smartphone, an app's probably not the answer. If you struggle with handwriting, you might not want to use a written to-do list. And it might be, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but it might be that you have like a 2-step strategy. Maybe you love the mind map, big piece of paper idea, but you know that you're often out of the house. There can be an argument for jotting things in your notes app on your phone or in a little notebook you carry with you as you're out and about, as long as there's also a system where when you get back in the house, you transfer that straight onto the mind map, which helps you understand those tasks better and how they fit in with all the other tasks you've got to do. So don't go creating a 12-step system or a 16-step system. But if one approach really, really speaks to you, but it's not practical in one particular way, maybe consider whether there's a 2-step process that you can incorporate. So if your favoured method isn't accessible to you, you have a way of still capturing ideas as they occur to you that you can then transfer onto your preferred system. But generally speaking, the more steps, the more we can get distracted or lose track or start to think, this is too complicated, I can't be bothered. I've got a favour to ask that could make a big difference. If you've been enjoying the podcast and want to support it, here are some ways you could do it. Consider making a donation. Every pound helps me keep the podcast running. Alternatively, show some love by leaving a review. Your words really mean a lot to me, and they help others to discover the podcast. And do spread the word. Share the episodes with anyone who might benefit from listening. Whether it's a donation, a review, or just sharing, your support keeps me going. Find out more at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. So I'm going to talk about avoiding distractions during idea capture. This is what I have been trying to work out, and I'm getting to a process that is actually working for me. And that's not to say it's the process that will work for you. But what I'm trying to do is give you lots of ideas and lots of possibilities. And then I will tell you how I'm currently, at least, making this work. So there are lots of distractions that can get in the way of capturing our ideas. As I mentioned before, if your idea capture involves opening your phone or opening your laptop, or even just going to a different website, there can be stages in there where something captures our attention. We notice we've got a Facebook notification in another tab, or we open our phone and realise we've got a missed call from the doctors. There's all these kind of things that, if you've got a brain like mine, that's suddenly where your attention is and you've no idea what you were supposed to be doing. When you're capturing ideas, think about how you can minimise those distractions. One way can be setting dedicated idea capture time. Don't let yourself multitask. You say, okay, the next 10 minutes is me writing down everything I need to remember. There's no podcast on in the background. You're not also scrolling Instagram at the same time. You're going, it's 9 a.m., the first 10 minutes of every day, or jotting down everything I need to remember. Minimizing interruptions and noise is an important part of this. If you decide that's a good plan, but actually 9 a.m. is often when the postie knocks on the door with a parcel, that won't work. So think through what can minimize noise, interruptions. Are your kids at school? Are you likely to get a phone call? Try and minimize all of that. That can also include making sure that, say you're using a notebook to capture your ideas, it doesn't also contain interesting journal entries that you might want to reread. It can include having that notebook and a pen in a place where you can reliably find it, so that your idea capture time isn't eaten into by a frantic, where did I put it? And none of these pens work, and all of those things that are not conducive to remembering everything you've got to remember and doing everything you've got to do. And another way to streamline our idea captures can be using voice assistants. And which voice assistant you use will depend on the technology in your home. It might be Alexa if you've got Amazon Alexa devices. It might be Siri if you've got Apple devices. There's a range of them. I am an Android person, and so for me it is Google Assistant. But all of them have some kind of functionality for idea capture. And for me, because I've transitioned to using Google Tasks as my to-do list, using my Google Assistant has become an invaluable way for me to capture ideas on my to-do list often without even having to stop what I'm doing. So if I am cooking a meal and I suddenly have a great idea, instead of having to either forget the idea or get distracted from cooking with disastrous implications, what I do is this. Hey Google, at 9 a.m. tomorrow, remind me to take out 3 rubbish bags.
Okay, I'll remind you tomorrow at 9 a.m.
And sure enough, at 9 a.m. tomorrow, she will remind me. And not only will she remind me, that has now been added to my Google Tasks list without me having to even stop what I'm doing. So I can instantly forget, again, all about it, because it's been outsourced from my brain onto my Google Tasks list. And I know not everybody will have Android phones. It will be a slightly different system with Siri or with Alexa. But for me, this is what's working for me. For me, this is omnipresent. I've pretty much always got my phone to hand, so it is readily accessible at all times. It is efficient. I don't even have to open my phone. I just speak and it does it automatically. It's very quick and easy. It is organised because it has been added to my to-do list with a date and time. I have my Google Tasks list ordered by date, so everything is visible when I need it to be. It's secure enough for me. It's not a matter of national security that I need to take some rubbish bags out. The one it doesn't really comply with is respect for offline thinking. It should accommodate the fact that many people do their best thinking away from technology. However, although it is inherently an online tool, what it manages for me to do is allow me to use an online tool without having to proactively go online. It is, of course, online, but I don't have to go on the internet to make it happen. So for me, this is what is working at the moment. And it's working effectively. I will get a reminder. It's on my list. I didn't have to stop what I was doing. I didn't have to get distracted. It was streamlined. And this is not to say it's the answer for you. but it demonstrates that it is possible to find a solution that works. And it demonstrates that with a bit of creative thinking, a lot of us can come up with something. So once we've captured these ideas, once we've captured the tasks we need and want to do on our to-do list, I keep referring to a to-do list. That, of course, can be your mind map. It can be whatever system you come up with. It's just shorthand. But how do we then turn to-do list items into action? One important thing is to prioritize. And there are different ways to do this. You might want to look at what's urgent. For instance, it makes sense to prioritize the most urgent things. Another approach is to prioritize the tasks that will make the most impact. You might want to listen to my episode on the 80-20 rule about that, about doing the things, the 20% of things that cause the 80% of impact. You might want to prioritize based on what your own goals are. Maybe you could have more impact by doing a task in your bedroom, but your real goal at the moment is your kitchen. You really, really want your kitchen to be clear and tidy and clean. Then maybe that's what you prioritize. You've written all your tasks down and you prioritize the kitchen ones. And for me, with Google Tasks, I really appreciate that you can do things like add stars to your tasks, which helps me work out how to prioritize what I need to do. Another important step for integrating your to-do list into action, hoarding action, is to look at whether the ideas you're capturing are an appropriate size. I could ask Google to remind me to de-hoard my house at 1 o'clock tomorrow. That's not reasonable. So if you look at the tasks you've captured, and some of them are just unreasonably big, divide them into smaller, more manageable tasks. So you want to divide large tasks into tasks that are manageable and realistic and smaller. So if you've written down tidy the living room and your living room is full beyond full, maybe you want to break that down, and under tidy the living room, you might write tidy the area by the door, tidy the area by the radiator, tidy the area by the bookshelf. And so then you've got your big task, tidy the living room, but you've also got more manageable steps, kind of bite-sized things you might actually be able to do. And again, with Google Tasks, the way I'm doing that, and there was a similar thing you could do in Toodle-Do, where you can have subtasks. So I can have my main task and then all the different steps as subtasks. Similarly, when I use a written to-do list, that for me, a written list tends to be, say I've got a lot to do in one afternoon and I'm overwhelmed because maybe it's a lot of small tasks, but there just feels like an awful lot of them. I will write a list just specific to that day or just specific to that afternoon, and I will have that on paper next to me so I can see it and I can see how far I'm getting down the list. And so similarly with written tasks, you can add subtasks. If you're doing a mind map type exercise, that can be perfect for subtasks. You have the word kitchen in the middle of the paper and then an arrow going out that says cabinets, and then an arrow from there. One of them says the top, like the surfaces on top of the cabinets. Another says inside the cabinets. And then arrows from there breaking it down, saying the top shelf of the tin cupboard, and really visually represent all the different subtasks that are part of your bigger goal. And the other thing with to-do lists is being realistic, especially about timings. Now, you may or may not want to add timings to your to-do list. If I have a particular deadline, I add timings. Otherwise, I often find them a bit oppressive, a bit pressurizing, but your mileage will vary. As we said in the early days of the internet, if you do make specific time slots for specific tasks, allow yourself some flexibility. Even if that is the way you approach the world and it really, really suits you, you need wiggle room. If you have all kinds of lofty goals for the day and then you get a migraine, there's not a lot you can do but go and lie down in a darkened room. And you need your system to be able to accommodate real life and flexibility. And then also when you're looking at how to use lists like this for your dehoarding, there's something really useful about the visual representation of it, whether that is making sure things are checklists so you can cross them off. I've got my Google Tasks set so that when I click something as done, it disappears and I can only see what's left to do. That feels very gratifying. Similarly, if I'm on a day where I need a handwritten to-do list, crossing things off, there's no feeling like it. If you are using something like a Kanban board, that can be a really visual way to track your progress and work out how far you've got left to do and what to prioritize. But having some way of giving yourself that little dopamine hit of doing something and then crossing it off the list, whatever crossing it off the list looks like, it genuinely helps a lot of people, and I'm one of those people. And so keep those factors in mind when you are trying to turn the ideas you've dumped onto a piece of paper or spoken into your phone or organized beautifully. Think about the importance of those things. First of all, prioritizing them. A long list with no sense of priority. I'm not saying it's useless. It can still definitely help. But once you've prioritized things on whatever terms you want to do that, the easier it is to know what to do next. The next thing to keep in mind is breaking down large tasks. The third, be realistic with your timings. And the fourth is there a way to cross things off or tick things off or colour things in when you've done them to give you, first of all, a visual representation of what you've done and what you've got left to do. And secondly, to give you that little dopamine boost that we all crave. So for me, idea capture has always been fraught with the potential for distraction and forgetting what I'm doing. I've experimented with all kinds of to-do lists and organising tools over the years. And while Toodle-Do worked for me for a long time, and while paper lists work for me in very specific circumstances, the combination of the way Google Tasks works and me being able to speak things to add to my list is currently working really perfectly for me. But what you need to do now is think about how those principles I've talked about could work in your life, whatever your idea capture system looks like. So have a think about the different idea capture methods that are out there. Do some experimenting with them. Try things out to see what works best. Try a written list if you've never done that. It might be the best thing you've ever done. It might not work at all. Try a big piece of paper with a diagram and scraggly arrows going here and there that you understand even if nobody else does. But think about then how you can make those things that you diligently capture on your to-do list, how you can make those things turn into a way to make your home more like the place you want it to be, because that's the goal. That has to be the goal.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
So shout out to the Help Hull podcast with Sophie Hagen and Abby Wambar. And they are talking in this episode about a book called Sober Curious. And there are two things that really stand out to me about this little bit, about stopping something and then relapsing. Have a listen.
Another thing I liked about this is she then looks at, because I really like quitting things. Like I like for exactly what you just said, I love quitting things because it helps me look at my relationship with them. I've done sober months. I've been vegan for a while. I don't know what else I've quit. Tons of stuff. I like looking at my relationship with things by being like, I'm not going to do it for this long and just take a look. And something she talks about in this book, because she's not sober, as she calls it, is not calling it a relapse, but calling it a reminder, so that if you drink again, you look at that experience and you think, what did I remember about why I don't drink usually from that? Or what did I remember about why I did want to drink? And that I find really helpful. I find it really helpful a lot of times when it's just like okay to not do something perfectly, basically, because I have a tendency where it's like, if I screw up, then I'm starting over from day one all the time. And I really like her thinking where it's like, no, that was a reminder. You're looking at that as a thing you can get something from.
That is it for me. The thing this whole podcast is for me is like every book, even when it doesn't apply to you at all necessarily, will have something that makes you go, oh. Yeah. I need a word for it because it's going to come up again and again, and I can't just call it, oh. But we had it, like it was that weird sexist parable in the first book you did. And this is it for me. Because I think me and the author of this book has the same relationship with perfectionism and maybe restriction as well. Like restriction for me is incredibly triggering. Any restriction for me makes me do whatever it is I'm trying to restrict, like times 1,000. But this is like, oh yeah, when I've been trying to lessen the meat I eat or how much meat I eat, when I then have had meat, because I know it's important for me to not just do something cold turkey, I have done that automatically where I've gone, okay, so was that great? How did that make me feel? Was it easier? Was it better? Did it taste better? And then I go, actually, no, I actually didn't like the consistency. I didn't like the feeling. I didn't like the price. I didn't, whatever it is. I just loved this. I wrote it down in my little notebook. Not relapse, but a reminder.
Yeah.
That was it for me. That was my moment.
Okay, so the first thing that stood out to me is that I am very much a Sophie, who was the person who spoke second, more than an Abby. But Abby's idea that she loves quitting things because she loves seeing how it feels to be without it, I think is a fascinating way of seeing the world. And I kind of want to experiment with that a bit myself. If I can see quitting something in that way, rather than in a deprivation, scarcity way, I think that could be really liberating. But the other thing that struck me from that little clip was that approach to, in inverted commas, relapse. Sorry, it sounds like the actual gunpowder plot is happening outside my bedroom window. Note to self, don't record on bonfire night next year. So, regardless of how you or I are with alcohol, for instance, alcohol isn't an issue for me. But with plenty of things are. So, for instance, as you know, I avoid charity shop shopping because I know that it's my absolute nemesis. I know that I can't do that healthily or safely. But let's say I go out tomorrow and I'm passing a charity shop and I just can't resist. And I go in and I come out with bags and bags and bags of stuff. What I would normally do is really berate myself, be really unimpressed with myself, feel like I'd relapsed and I'd failed. But actually, framing it as not a relapse, but a reminder, and as, more importantly, I think, as a prompt to look at, but how did it actually feel and how has it left me feeling now? And what can I learn from that experience of having done something I try not to do? What can I learn from it going forward? I think that's a really powerful message. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. I find use, and I know not everybody will. It's secure enough. Christ, the bookshelf, and you need your system to be able.
Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.